questions? Okay, then we're just going to jump right into the organ biofeedback graphs. This is the fun part of it. Now, I'm just going to blow this up on screen so you can see this. Now, I mentioned last meeting, and I'm going to repeat it again today, that everything that we're seeing here will be reflected either in the chakra flow, the overall health and vitality of a client, as well as the numerical values. With the organ biofeedback graph software, you also get the numerical values of every organ and gland being measured. And where this number is illustrated exactly where it is in the biofeedback graph. So whether you have the graphs or not, you can see the same information but just displayed in different perspectives. Of course, the organ graph looks a little bit more professional, you know, when it comes to people who are, you know, in the field of more diagnostics, but nonetheless, it's a really nice feature to have when you're doing any kind of biofeedback, which is what I'm going to be showing you shortly. Okay, now, oops, here we go. So when we look at the cerebellum, we can see that the number value is 4.31. And you'll also see in the graphs that to the left, there's these little strokes. So it goes from 0 to 4, 6, where the turquoise line is, to 8, and then 10 being right at the top. So those number values are reflected in that way. And it's going to look at the exact last point of the last point of the reading. So if we look here, you can see that we're right at the 4 stroke, and when we go a little back to where the red measuring line is, you can see that red measuring line stopped literally where that number 4 value stroke is. That's why we can see that 4.31 versus the cerebellum is 9.69. So we can see that's right at the top of the graph. But if you look closely, it's just a little blip, so it was right under the 10 value. So those number values are indicating what we're seeing on the biofeedback graphs. Now, the advantage to the graphs are you can see the person's constitution. And last week I mentioned that when we're looking at that red measuring line, when we see nervousness, instability, stress, it's going to be reflected in the stability of that line. So you can see that I'm not strong and stable, that there are some fluctuations, which is telling you that I don't have a strong kapha constitution, because kapha, the graph lines would just be like this, absolutely straight. But when people are pitta or vata, then you'll see more instability. So for anybody who practices Ayurvedic medicine, then that actually shows you some dynamics of the pitta, vata, and kapha. Now, I am a pitta kapha, so you can see I do have stability, but also the instability, which is that pitta constitution. Now, one time I was doing a show, and this was quite comical because it was a metaphysical show in Denver, Colorado, if any of you has attended that. It's a metaphysical show, and my booth was next to this booth that had these huge amethyst geodes that were taller than me. They were just huge. And when I kick-started my Biopulsar in the morning, all of a sudden I could see that my graph lines were like this, absolutely crazy. Kind of similar to a little bit what we're seeing in the cerebellum, but more dramatic, kind of more like what we're seeing in the stomach, but literally the graphs were going to the 10 and back down to the 0 point. So the stress was just showing extreme excitability. And I'm going, well, this is interesting. I've never seen that for myself. And a couple of the girls that were helping me at the show came into the booth, and I said, go on the Biopulsar right away. And sure enough, the same thing, their graphs were all over the place. And right away, I understood that it was the crystals that were in the next booth were vibrating at such a high frequency, it was actually causing a lot of stress on our body. And this is sometimes what we have to understand is there's all these unforeseen, you know, things that we're subjected to that because it's invisible to our you know, the naked eye, we're not always going to see how it causes stress in our body. Now, for people who do feng shui, this is a great graph to show people in areas where there's things that are causing stress to the body. So what I found was we actually did a lot of cleansing in our booth, and we created a protection grid around our booth. So as soon as we did that, then the energy within the booth normalized. But it was very interesting to see how, you know, these organ biofeedback graphs were going absolutely haywire because of the crystal energy. Now, I also had somebody that put a huge crystal on my lap expecting to see my aura would shift, and it didn't shift. And it was because I was actually synced with that crystal. So this is how you know if something's good for you or not, by looking at the graphs and actually seeing the variables. Now you can see the same thing with the aura, but it's a little bit hard because the aura animation is constantly moving. But for example, if all of a sudden I had something that wasn't good to me, then my aura colors would probably go down in frequency, where you would see the lower frequency colors of gray, red, orange, and yellow coming in. Versus if something's good for you, you will see the aura actually stabilize in more turquoise. And these are some of the examples that I'm trying to illustrate on, you know, our Facebook page. But, you know, I'll pay attention to Facebook if you guys would actually post on our Facebook page. Because if you post, then I know you're looking at it. If you don't post, then I'm not going to pay attention to it. So I'm kind of lazy in that respect. I'll only work on things where I know people are excited. And this is why, as long as you guys show up for meetings, I'll keep doing meetings. As soon as the meeting, you know, attendance drops down, then I'll stop doing meetings. Because then if you're not committing, I'm not committing, kind of thing. So it's a little bit of blackmail, okay? Now, going back to the graphs, there's other things that we can study from the graph. So you can see here, my cerebellum, it went stronger, then it dropped off, it jumped up, it dropped off. And this is consistent with an organ that doesn't have stability, where you're going to see the graphs are a little bit more all over the place. But once you start to study what organs and glands are typical of you or your client that are, you know, often flatlining or problematic, this is exactly what's showing. So I can already show you with my Excel spreadsheet that my organs that are constantly problematic are the cerebellum, as well as the rectum, the hips, and my mouth are the typical ones. Sometimes my armpit fluctuates depending on what's going on, but literally my hip, my cerebellum, my mouth, and my rectum are the 4 organs that constantly are either flatlining or they're showing slightly below normal. So you can see my hip here at the beginning, as well as closer to the end of the scan, were you know, below normal. We can also see my rectum was flatlining, but still when I got a reading, it was lower than normal. My armpit likewise is all over the place. It was trying to connect to the optimum range, but it actually balanced out more in the normal range, where my cerebellum again was a little bit more fluctuating, where my mouth, it's very rare that I get a reading on my mouth for a couple of reasons. For one, when I was 6 years old, I smashed my 2 front teeth. A boy jumped on my back and I slipped on ice and my 2 front teeth were smashed, and I ended up getting multiple surgeries, root canals, et cetera, et cetera. And then at age 13, I broke my jaw. My mouth is actually slightly crooked. And when you have an energetic weakness that is resultant of a lot of physical trauma, it's harder to get it into the normal range. However, one of the reasons why I love the aura perspective, because when we look at the results, for example, of my mouth, we can see that it is a flat gray. And when I first started on the Biopulsar, my mouth actually was in a very dark, dirty color. And what I did was I got all the mercury out of my mouth. And so although the jaw is broken and maybe the energy flow isn't a strong resultant of, you know, some physical damage, I've gotten the mercury out of my cells. So, you know, this to me is something that and I call us energy detectives, okay? Because when we have the Biopulsar, We can tap into our intuition to get a lot of the psychosomatic information, but sometimes we also have to probe and ask a lot of questions. So had you been my aura counselor and said, Suzanne, I'm seeing that, we're not getting a strong reading from your mouth organ, and, again, we can substantiate it with the organ biofeedback graph being at that lower level. And if you would have asked me, is there anything that happened, in that area of your mouth, maybe a car accident or, some accident of some sort, I would have been able to tell you right away, yeah, I smashed my 2 front teeth and I broke my jaw. So you would have understood that there was a lot of physical damage. Now, also, when we talk about the energetic quality of the emotions, the mentality, and the spirituality, if we break down every aura reading into quadrants, then we can understand that maybe on a physical level, I have some challenges, but also on an energetic level, we have to decipher that information. So, growing up with my mother being my main influence, my mother always, instilled in me that I had to be strong and independent. And so therefore I held back on a lot of my emotions. And I saw emotions as a sign of weakness because that literally is what my mother taught me. Also, when I look at the different times of my life, at age 6, when I broke my 2 front teeth, there was some trauma in the family at that time. When I broke my jaw at age 13, it was the year my father was diagnosed with terminal cancer. When I had a car accident, I ended up having also TMJ in my mouth at age 16, was the year my father died. So at every point of my life where there was trauma to this area of the mouth, it reflected on that emotional, mental, and spiritual level. And on a spiritual level, when I first started with the Biopulsar, I didn't give myself permission to express my spiritual truth. So I understand that, these are things that are connected to my deficiency, but also we have to look at a lot of other fact. I talk for a living, so my mouth is constantly open. So it's very dehydrating. So of course there is going to be internal dryness in my mouth. Also, when people have problems with acid in the stomach, as we sleep during the night, the acid is regurgitating and coming up our esophagus into our mouth. And literally it becomes a festation for bacteria. And this is why, this is why a lot of people have problems with their mouth. Because as we get older, we start getting receding gum lines, more, things can get caught in our gums, and then next thing you know, we end up having gingivitis or other problems. So when people have a low reading in the mouth, we have to ask questions. We have to learn, what is it that's causing that deficiency? Is there acid in the stomach that's causing that bacteria growth? Do they have receding gum lines? Because maybe they're losing some of the nutritional value of their body, and our body will steal nutrition from extremities that aren't as important. So for example, to prevent a heart attack, your heart organ is going to steal energy from your energy matrix to feed it, which means areas of the body are going to lose energy because it's sort of like, and this was wild. I took a herbal course with this incredible guy that in Canada here in BC, the university discovered that when a huge tree would be dying, that all the trees within the community of that larger tree would feed life force to the bigger tree via the roots. So in a similar way to the human body, we can understand that when an organ is problematic and in essence dying, where the energy is going down and down and down in numerical value, that literally other parts of our body are going to starve to try to feed that one organ that's dying. So prior to somebody having a heart attack, we would actually see precursors in different areas of the graphs. So again, we have to understand that, we can see a lot of precursors with the number values, the color values, as well as, in the organ biofeedback graphs. So, you know, with myself, because of the fact that I know that I had all these problems, I am now loading up on nutrition to reverse a lot of signs. And it was exciting for me today because my descending colon was in the normal range. And when we note the descending colon, when the descending colon is problematic, and often when it's at a high level, that means that there's acid holes in the descending colon. That's a leaky gut syndrome. So I was a little bit high on that area because, you know, sometimes we do things maybe not as well as we should. And so, you know, for example, around Christmas time, I started getting too much into doing, you know, too many sweets, and it carried into January and February. And next thing you know, I started seeing my descending colon was soaring. So that was an understanding for me. So I'm back on eating a lot of greens and, you know, cutting out, you know, the amount of sweets that I was eating a couple months back. But when we see that there's too much acid in the digestive system, again, that can contribute to a low mouth reading, because then the person might have gingivitis and other things. And things that I do in my own practice is I look at people's tongues, because looking at their tongue tells me how much acid they have. If you see a white coating on a tongue, then you know that there is acid in the body. And this is where we have to think about the therapies that are going to, you know, the therapies that are going to reverse signs. You know, so for example, salt therapy would be a really good, you know, treatment to help get the body back into a more neutral state. So for example, you know, having people take salt baths or a cell salt, like a pH salt, before they go to bed. Because if people have, for example, acid reflux, then chances are that during the evening, they're just breeding bacteria in the mouth and into the esophagus, that the esophagus is being burned, which again would contribute to that low reading. Okay. Okay. Now, I'm going to go back to the graphs here. So, where was I? Just going through the graphs. Now, when it comes to the brain, the different functions of the brain relate to different aspects of the brain. You know, from the forehead brain areas relating to how we take whatever we've learned from our life and how we make decisions for the future. Versus the midbrain has a lot to do with how we're processing things at any given time, where the back brain has a lot to do with past recall and memory. So whenever I see things, for example, the cerebellum being the back brain, that has a lot to do with memory. So if that's flatlining, then that person is more inclined to be forgetful and not want to think about things of the past. And I know that's true of me. I don't like to think of the past because I always want to move forward in the future. I don't like to overanalyze things and get stuck on things. However, you know, again, that can hinder me from, you know, memory recall, that I'm not wanting to go into the past. So we have to acknowledge the past, present, and the future, because we need to have all aspects of, you know, our brain functioning to make appropriate decisions at this moment in time based on everything we've learned in history till this moment in time. So whenever I see gray in the brain, this tells me that there's brain fog. And again, if we look in our training manual, then we can look into, you know, the aspects of the brain that connect to the different things that the brain does. I'm not going to go into details because these are things that you guys need to do on your own. So when I have a client that is flatlining or low in the cerebellum, I open up my binder. Okay. And over the years, I've changed the cover of the binder, but most of the content of the binder has remained the same. But if I go to, you know, page, in my binder, it's approximately page 74. There's a whole dialogue on a psychological level, what the brain means, you know, as well as physically symptoms. And one of the things that I put into the data was where the information came from, whether it was Latin or elsewhere, because I'm a huge advocate that a lot of information in regards to body language comes from the studies that were done, hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, because we have to, understand that, psychology isn't something new to us today. This has been going on for hundreds of years. And as well, in the training manual, I put in some key questions. Now, in Auramed's Horoscope software, all this is taken away where you just get the heart of the information, which is what I love, is the fact that when you look at, any organ, they're going to be inciting all this information in regards to, the psychology of that organ and what it means in the exact color hue, where my data does not break it down into color. And I'm just going to switch to the horoscope here so you can just quickly see what I'm talking about. But there are a lot of textbooks that talk about body language. However, in body language, there's not a lot of reference to the brain. So we have to go with what Auramed's written. And for some of you older users too, in the information that I'm sending out will be Martina's new booklet, Energy Language of the Organs, which she makes referral to the different organs and some information that you can pull from. But you can pull out your training manual and just, read it with the client. This is what I do, because for one, I don't have everything memorized, okay, guys? Like, I wish I had, that memory power that literally memorizes everything. But as you can see from my own cerebellum, it's not as strong as it could be. So, my memory recall isn't as great. And so therefore, I do rely on my book studies, okay? So I open up that page and it gives me all that ammunition of what I can talk to with the client. But Auramed has the horoscope software that breaks it down so you can go into more, aspects of, the body language. And I'm having a little bit of trouble getting my words out here, but when I first got Horoscope's report or got Horoscope software, I read what it had to say about the mouth. And the first thing that came out of my mouth was, well, that doesn't make sense. And and then I said to myself, oh my goodness, you're so opinionated, Susie, read it again. And I read it again and I went, nah, still doesn't make sense. But this is, sometimes when we read something from the perspective of our energy, we don't get it. We have to understand that this information that's written in the horoscope is for your soul, and higher consciousness. So even though you don't get it, your soul consciousness gets it. So I kept rereading it, and I think it was about the 5th or 6th time that I read the report on the mouth organ. All of a sudden I had a past recollection from when I was a little girl. And I went, oh my goodness, now I'm understanding that, when we look at this psychosomatic information, that it's information for us to have our, unconsciousness connect with our subconsciousness and higher consciousness so we can release that programming. And so the first time I actually saw my mouth go to 6.5. Okay. However, the next day it was back down. And I understand because there's layers and layers and layers that, that build up our energy dynamics. So obviously there's other things that I still need to study and analyze to get it to that stronger level. But on a level of health, I'm feeling much better in the throat because 20 years ago and even 10 years ago, I would get laryngitis constantly, strep throat, laryngitis, tonsillitis. All these symptoms were issues that I had as a child that I no longer get today. And that's the whole thing, is as you start repairing yourself or your clients start to self-heal, then, the symptoms that they had on a regular basis will start to diminish. And similarly, doing exercises and increasing my nutritional protocol and all these wonderful things have contributed to, the stabilization of my individual organs more so. But Another thing that we'll see with the organ biofeedback graph is the stability. And normally I don't show this instability, but I can also tell you that these Zoom meetings do take its toll on me. I do get a little anxious. So because I took this reading, I was sharing with a few of you beforehand that I had a few problems getting my screen share working. So Nikolai and I got into a little disagreement, and I threw him out of the room here because I wasn't getting to where I wanted to go, and I was getting quite frustrated. So that could also be reflective of some of the instability that I got a little upset. So bear in mind that, from time to time, you will see some variables, but what you're looking for more than anything is the constants. And this is why I know the cerebellum is an area that fluctuates on myself, likewise the armpit, the hip, the mouth, and occasionally, and I should say occasionally the armpit and occasionally the rectum. Now the rectum was also showing weakness, and then it showed some stability. Over the weekend, I had constipation issues, and then I Monday and Tuesday I was more regular, and then on Wednesday, yesterday, again it was Tuesday, I got constipated again. I didn't have a bowel movement, and then Wednesday I had a bowel movement. So sometimes these shitty conversations that you're going to have with clients, are truly, yeah, I know, it's my humor, it's my yellow humor. But you're going to have these conversations with people about their stool and what it looks like. Because I know that when my stool is dark and it's hard, it's been in my body longer, versus when it's free flowing, it comes out in, nice patterns and shapes, and it looks like a very new stool. So again, when you see organs that are problematic, you have to ask those dirty questions, okay? And sometimes those questions can be a little bit taunting, but the more you work on your red, there is no subject you can't talk about. I will talk about anything, because literally this is what we'll see on the Biopulsar. When somebody's root chakra is weak, you know that their sex drive is probably going to be low. So you've got to ask those questions, because again, this is part of why they're hiring you, is to help them find solutions, right? To help them find answers to their questions. So we were just talking about the brain. Now, when we go through the brain, like I said, a lot of this information is in your textbook. So I'm not going to go into the details of every organ per se. I'm going to talk about in more general terms. So the pineal gland is your sleep gland. That is your body's gauge on how well you're sleeping. And I mentioned this in the last meeting, that when you're sleeping with, other people or animals, then there can be that disturbance, because if they toss and turn, you'll toss and turn. If you're in a lighter sleep that time, sometimes when you're a heavier sleep, then nothing's going to affect you. But again, if you're in a slightly lighter sleep, then you're going to notice that your pineal gland will be affected. Now, when it's at a hyper level with myself, then that could be denoting either I'm sleeping really well and my sleep is like, when I hit the pillow, typically I fall asleep immediately. So that's denoting that my pineal gland is intact. However, yesterday I fell asleep after midnight, and I did have a restless sleep. My dog sleeps with me too. So, not only do I have my partner, I have my dog in bed now. And so that will affect my sleep. And yesterday it definitely did so. Now, if we look at the energetic quality of the pineal gland, it's also connected to our capabilities of intuition. And I do have a strong intuition, so my pineal gland is often very heightened anyways. So, there can be other factors that can result into the pineal gland. And a lot of people are on shift work, so take a look at that. And I also did a family where I did the mother and the daughter, and the grandmother all had sleep apnea. Now, in their case, the pineal gland was flatlining. So there was no reading. It was at the bottom of the graph for all of them. And it also showed up in the gray color. So again, we can see the correlation between the color and the inactivity. or in this case, it was inactivity. The ear organ is about how well you hear, but it also has a lot to do with how you're being heard on an energetic level. And when I say energetic level, I'm talking about, the spirit, the mind, the emotions versus the physicality. Now, on a physical level, it could also denote that the person has earwax. And I just watched a video last night about earwax. On Facebook, there's all these commercials, and I bought this apparatus that you stick in your ear instead of using Q-tips, and it actually takes any moisture out of the ear. So after I shower, it's something that I can use to take the moisture out. But I was watching the commercial, and all this yellow stuff was coming out on theirs. When I use it, there's no yellow stuff that comes out on it. There's no earwax buildup. Thus, guess what? My ear is within the normal range. Slightly a little hyperactive, but I do have a sensitivity to hearing. And it's kind of funny because in our office, we have 2 floors, and they'll leave the fan on in the bathroom downstairs, and it's in the middle of the building, and I can hear it in my office upstairs because my hearing is very acute. So it is heightened because I do have very good hearing. It's one of my superpowers. But again, if somebody has high energy in the ear, you've got to ask them questions that might relate to that. Like, do you have sensitive hearing? Whereas if the ear is low, then the energy is being blocked. And that's when we would probably think about things like candida if we see the color is orange in the ear, or again, a buildup of earwax. We had one girl in the office, she would get so much buildup in her ears that literally it would come out like the size of a quarter when they pulled it out. It was just, and people manage with that, but yet that can also affect the brain, because when your ears are plugged, the moisture can actually hang out in this area and create a bacteria growth, which then seeps into the nose. So often when I'm looking at the ear, I'm also looking at the nose. Okay, so, and again, the sinuses, and you could even look at the lymph system, how that's flowing, because, again, is there any seepage into the throat, right? The eyes are how you see, and also what you want to see. So a lot of times people have vision issues because of the fact, and I'm going to take off my glasses because I don't need them right now. I need them to see small print when I was looking at things. But the vision is about how well you see. And when you can't see distance, I think that is referred to as nearsightedness, which is also indicating you don't want to see things in your immediate future, versus farsightedness is you don't want to see things into the far future. I think that's how it goes. But again, in the training manual, it goes through that a little bit more with clarity, so you can study that information. The nose again, is about your sense of smell. And a lot of people don't have an acute sense of smell. And this can be an issue because obviously your sense of smell denotes whether or not you're toxic. So when people lose their sense of smell, often they're very toxic inside. And there's more, connection to the nose on that psychological level. But the nose is also indicating if there's anything backed up. When it's at a very high level, people will often blow clear, versus when it's at a lower level, they will actually blow phlegm. Okay, so, and again, the color is going to indicate that, because if they have bacteria in there that's relating to, too much yeast, then they'll blow, that toxic looking yellowy orange color, and it'll be reflected in the orange color in their aura scan. The mouth, we've talked enough about that, I think, so we'll just skip over that to the thyroid. Now, the thyroid is your body's temperature gauge, and it's also your gauge for weight loss and weight gain. So if people are trying to lose weight, then this has to be right on the green line. Otherwise, they're not going to lose or gain weight in either case. So when people want to lose weight, we want to get them on that harmony line. And one of the things that, for a few of you who attended the class here in Vancouver, one of the exercises that I do is I have people stamp their feet, and by stamping their feet, it will actually regulate the thyroid. And this is an issue because I remember after my car accident, I did gain quite a bit of weight. And when I gained that weight, I became more lethargic. And I used to play all kinds of sports. And all of a sudden, I didn't have the capacity to play because I had so much pain. I was injured also in my lower back. And so therefore, I wasn't being as athletic. And I learned that the more weight I gained, the harder it was for me to actually do anything. And when I made that decision to lose weight, I obviously changed my eating habits, and I started losing the weight, and I gained a lot more energy to be able to exercise. But when you have clients that don't have that capability to exercise, even by bouncing at a ball, and you'll notice I have a couple balls in the background here, because I actually bought a bunch of balls that any of our employees can sit on the ball and bounce during the day. So this way they're moving their hips and they're stimulating their energy. So the energy is being activated, because even by bouncing on a ball for 2 minutes, your heart rate goes up, your red energy will go up, and you'll start to balance your endocrine glands, your thyroid being one of them. So even people who are having a hard time with exercise, they can buy themselves one of these balls, and you can buy them at a lot of the big box stores now for $10. I have one that's weighted, it costs me $20, so it doesn't roll around. So there's different, opportunities of what people can do. And I bought one for my mother, and I told her, because she was quite concerned not having the balance, because she's in her 80s, I said, put the ball in between a doorway, put your hands on the doorway itself, and bounce on that ball. So you've got your hands on the doorway, because a lot of people aren't going to buy a reformer, which you can do the same thing with a reformer. Reformers cost $50 at the very least, some of them even more, where one of these balls costs $10, and the effect is literally the same. Plus, when you're on the ball at work, and whether you have a home office or you go to an office, by being on that ball, you're constantly moving your hips, and so the energy won't lock in the hips. Because when we see instability in the hips, then we have to look at some possibilities. Is the person standing a lot at their job and not moving, or are they sitting a lot and not moving? Because the energy in the hips will get locked when people don't move. So again, that's another, insightful thing, because probably, 70 to 80% of people we put on the Biopulsar, we're going to see the energy stagnant in the hips right away, which will affect their atlas, which then again also affects their energy flow. And I'll talk more about that as we go through all the organs. The neck and the shoulder, that has a lot to do with your atlas, and it's also a huge stress barometer. So the shoulders are, all about, the weight of the world that you put on the shoulders, and the neck is part of, the communications from your physical reality outwards to, even the spiritual world. So a lot of people have problems in this area. And again, we would look at the hips to see whether or not that they have an imbalance with their atlas. The armpit, major towards your lymph system. And, we have to look at some of the precursor to other more serious situations. So for example, breast cancer, it's been proven that the lymph glands in the upper part of the region are congested, and often you'll feel nodules under the armpit. That is meaning that, the armpit energy is being blocked by those nodules, and if they're blocked, then the toxicity can seep into the breast tissue and then cause more problems for that area. And we have to look at some of the things that's happening in our world nowadays, where a lot of people are removing the hair under their armpits. Well, the hair is there for a reason, and when we remove it, then it actually allows toxins to come in from the outside world and lodge into that area as well. So, again, we're manipulating our body hair, because we feel that it's a little bit more appealing. But by doing that, we're also reaping some of the consequences, because the hair is on our body for a reason. And so therefore, when we remove that body hair, we're removing receptors. And in a lot of cultures, they don't even cut their hair because, again, it's believed that we receive a lot of information through our hair. Also, when the armpit is weak, then it could indicate poor deodorant. And I do use Color Energy's natural deodorant, so my pores are not blocked. However, I can share this story with you. I went traveling and I forgot to take my deodorant, and I went to a health store and I bought a natural deodorant, and when I went to use it the next day, it literally caked on a layer on top of my pores. And all of a sudden I started sweating throughout the day because my pores were blocked. And so again, we have to understand, we have to be careful even with natural formulas that they don't block the natural pore, because if it blocks the natural pore, then the toxins again are going to seep back into our breast tissue, and we don't want that happening. Also, with a lot of women, we wear bras, and so therefore we have to understand that wearing a bra can also cut off our lymph circulation. And I went to a health fair, this is going back probably 10 years ago, and there was a booth where they were selling bras that were supposed to help the lymph system, and I spent $140 on this bra, and when I got home and I started wearing it, it was so painful because it was so tight, I could feel it cutting off my circulation. And they were promoting it as something that would support your lymph system. So buyer beware, there's no way it was doing that. So I always tell women, as much as you can, don't wear a bra. You're better off wearing an undershirt or tops that, hide a little bit. Now, the upper arms, that has a lot to do with, how we're giving and receiving energy. And also, again, it's connected to the burdens that we take on. The esophagus. Here's another thing that happened. I had one of my Biopulsar owners who called me up, and she was crying. Her husband was diagnosed with stomach cancer, and they wanted to operate right away. And she said, Suzanne, I'm not seeing anything on the Biopulsar. And I said, well, send me his recording. I'll take a look for you. And when I looked at his recording, his esophagus was flatlining and it was gray. And I said, Vic, I'm not seeing anything in the stomach, but I'm seeing something in the esophagus. Please go back to your doctor and get your esophagus checked, or his esophagus checked. And the doctor was reluctant to do it, but she was determined that her husband gets retested. And they discovered he actually had stage 1 cancer of the esophagus. He did not have stomach cancer. And when he went to get the cancer removed, the esophageal surgeon said that he had never seen stage 1 cancer before because it's virtually undetectable in the esophagus. Now, that being said, also people who smoke are going to damage the esophagus, and that also includes fireworkers, because when you think about firemen, and if they get caught in inhaling any of that, toxic fumes of the smoke inhalation, then that can burn their throat. So anybody who smokes weed or smokes cigarettes or is involved in an industry where there is possibility of smoke, then that can damage the esophagus, and you'll see the esophagus at a low frequency. When it's at a higher frequency, it could also illustrate that there's some acid in that area. Maybe somebody just ate some acidic food. And I think I mentioned last week, I don't look as much as the hyperactivity as I do the hypoactivity, because the hypoactivity tells me that there's more damage and that the energetic weakness is a little bit more consistent, versus when it's at a hypoactive level, it could just be doing some repair. So for example, after you ate food, your stomach could be more active because it's processing the food. Okay. The lungs are about your intake, and again, people who have any kind of smoke inhalation then would see damage in that area. As well, there's a lot of toxicity in our environment nowadays because windows are closed, so we're breathing, a lot of airborne stuff that just keeps recirculating. And in places that have carpeting, imagine, the toxic fumes that come from carpets. It could be anything that's coming into your lungs through your mouth, mold spores, literally, it could just be a vast amount of things. So, again, we want to make sure the lungs are intact. The heart, again, anybody who's on the verge of a heart attack, you'll see gray in the heart. I've only seen it a few times. I had one gentleman where I said to him, you know, I really need you to start taking some cell salts. We need to reactivate your cells immediately because I'm seeing some signs that could result in something more serious down the road. I didn't want to tell him it was a heart attack. However, as we had a discussion, I asked him, so he was quite thin, extremely thin, and he looked like a sports athlete. So I said to him, tell me a little bit more about your eating habits. And he said, well, I don't eat breakfast. And I said, okay, what about lunch? Well, I'm not a big lunch eater. Dinner's my main meal. And I said, okay, well, tell me a little bit more about when you do eat, what do you eat? And he goes, well, I might eat grapes, or I do a lot of smoothies. And for dinner, I do a lot of power shakes. You know, and sometimes I'll have a regular meal. And I went, oh my God, this guy was so nutritionally deprived, because a lot of people don't realize that when you do a smoothie or a shake, if you do not chew it, then you're not creating the enzymes that help with the absorption of the nutrition that's in the smoothie. So I get a lot of people coming to me that do that for breakfast, where they'll have a smoothie or a shake, and yet I can see that their whole digestive system is needing repair. So we have to look at the things that people are doing to fully understand, you know, why we're seeing what we're seeing. The thymus gland is our body's immune system. So you can see mine is a little hyperactive, which again, if you're in an atmosphere where you're not breathing good air, then your lymph system might be doing more filtration systems. So try to get out in the air, in the sunlight. It's been raining a lot here in Vancouver. So for the last few days, I've been a little bit more, inside rather than outside. But again, usually my thymus is right on tack, so I'm not too concerned with that. But the more you do people and you're seeing that there is, you know, some constants with their thymus gland, then you know that that can be resultant of an immune problem, right? Stomach. Now I'm just going to kind of lump a lot of this together because, when it comes to, body diagnostics, that's not quite my forte. I'm a better aura reader than I am, but I look at a lot of the commonalities of what I see in the body. So we will see a lot of people that have problems with their digestive system. The main things I look at is the pancreas. So you can still see my pancreas is quite high, which is saying that, I lost something here. Just bear with me 1 second. Oh, now I made it worse. Hang on. Okay, that didn't work. Okay. I'm going to do that. Nope. I shouldn't have touched it, and I did. Okay. Oh, now I've really mucked it up. Can you guys still hear me? Okay, that's good. Yeah, Nancy, that's probably true. She's saying I work too much and not enough play, but it's okay. I'll laugh at myself right now. That'll be a form of play. Okay, now where did you go? Okay, that's not it. Ah, here. Okay. I think. Darn. Okay, I'll try that. Ah, got it. Okay, we're back in action here. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so going back to the stomach region or the digestive system, I always look at the pancreas to see how high it is, because that just tells me that that person is probably consuming too much sugar. And sugar can come in a lot of forms. And right now, Vancouver or in BC, this is prime cherry season. So I'm ODing on cherries right now. So I actually had quite a bit of cherries. So that could be one of the reasons why my pancreas is a little high. But again, there could be a number of reasons. So anything that's white, like white flour, white sugar, that's going to heighten your pancreas. Also alcohol use. I think I told you guys a story last week where I had this guy that couldn't understand why his pancreas was so high, and then it ended up coming out that he drank a bottle of wine every day. So that's a lot of sugar in wine. I'm sure there's a cup of two. The spleen, that's part of your body's thymus system. The liver, that helps to get rid of the toxins that are incoming through what you're eating. The duodenum, oh heck, I don't even know what that one does, but it's part of the digestive system anyways. So again, look at your book for a lot more of the details. More importantly, I look at the pancreas as well as the small intestine and the descending colon. And I know the other organs are equally important, but the small intestines is indicating how well you are at absorbing your nutrition. And I had this one guy that came to see me at the clinic, and when I put him on the system, his small intestine flatlined. And so right away I said to him, I don't think you're absorbing your nutrition. I think you're under your malnutrition. I said, you look quite thin. And he looked at me and he goes, you don't even know me. And within 2 minutes, you're telling me I have a problem with my small intestine. He goes, I've been sick for 10 years. And just this past year, I was diagnosed with a rare small intestine disease. So, you know, again, I didn't know. I just said, I don't think you're absorbing your nutrition, and because you look underweight, I think you're malnutritioned. And so I'm always looking at the small intestine to tell me how well that person is in regards to absorbing nutrition. And we got to remember that when we see a lot of gray in the aura, I don't like to hide anything. If I see a lot of gray, then again, I'm looking at the small intestine, because if we're seeing a lot of gray in the aura, then this is telling us that there is a lot of internal dryness. You can use the gel, you can use the cream, you can spray the hand with water. It'll strengthen the contact, but ultimately there's still something going on internally that could be resultant of that. And remember, there's all kinds of environmental stresses. We're bombarded with EMFs, we're bombarded with the toxicity of our air. There's so many things that are affecting us. So when we're under a lot of stress, then we have to understand that this could be reflected in other ways, because our body's going to use more microminerals and macrominerals to protect us. Because what creates a strong and healthy aura is the amount of nutrition we're feeding our physical body, because then our organs are going to be healthy, and then we're going to emanate a very strong and healthy aura. But when internally we have dryness, our aura starts to shrink, and we have to look at these things. And it could be resultant from 10, 20, 30 years ago, not necessarily what we're doing today. Okay, because just going back to the whole iron thing, I learned that if your mother was iron deficient when she was pregnant with you, then there's a stronger likelihood you're going to be born with an iron deficiency and end up with an anemia in your life, unless you're aware of that. But, you know, these aren't things that were talked about, you know, a long time ago. Now we can bring that to the forefront and try to get to the root causes. So when people are deficient of the macro minerals, then typically they're also deficient of the micro minerals. And we need the micro minerals, which is the binding agent for the macro minerals. So again, we have to look at the bigger picture here. And that's why when I see a lot of gray, I'm more focused on, you know, working with cell salts and other things that are going to get water into the cells, because then I know the nutrition is going to get into the cells as well. So the small intestine is how I determine that. Then jumping to the descending colon, all I can tell you is I was taught by a naturopathic doctor that when the descending colon is uber high, meaning it's, you know, close and hovering to the top and in the white or high frequency colors of pinks and violets, then there can be some possibility that they have little holes in their descending colon. And if there's holes in any part of the colon, then what happens is that the food can get back into the blood and pollute the blood. And I always look at the spine as to how healthy the blood is. Okay, and often in the aura picture, you will see that the spine looks like a toxic gray or red or a muted color. That's actually telling you the blood is dirty. And I'm really hoping that we're going to be getting our serrapeptidase back. We had great success because serrapeptidase will actually help clean your blood. Okay, and we were selling a serapeptidase that was double enteric coated, so it would actually get to the gut. So if you want to learn more about that, then we can have that conversation at another time. The rectum, we talked about constipation, and it could also result of diarrhea. The pelvis and the buttocks. I read an article written by a doctor that actually said 70% of people hold their butt cheeks. So when you're standing, note whether or not you hold your butt cheeks in. It's an area that we tend to hold in. I don't know why, but again, that's going to promote energy loss, which again is all connected to the rectum and the lower part of the process of elimination. So I break everything down into the different networks, and one of the forms that I'm working on is breaking down the whole body into the different networks, so you know what organs and glands are connected to different things. So I've got the waterworks system in there, the respiratory system, as well as the process of elimination. Yes, and it could be related to poor posture, absolutely, because remember that when the hips are out, the pelvis is going to be out, the neck and shoulder, and the cerebellum, as well as the ears. That has a lot to do with the body's equilibrium. And one of the charts that is going to be on the list that I'll be sending you guys is this chart. And a lot of people don't know how to use it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make shorter videos to describe how I use each chart, because some of these charts are quite detailed. And I know that people are underusing some of the supplies. This is also in your training manual, but I sell it laminated because this is one that I refer to a lot because it gives you the synopsis of what every organ and gland does. But also, on the chart, I illustrate in the red zone that everything that's in the red zone is connected to your body's atlas, your chi, and the elimination process. So right there, I have on here, for the atlas, you look at the knees, the feet, the hip, the spine, the adrenal glands are also connected, the pelvis, the rectum, as well as the neck, the shoulder, the mouth, the ears, and the cerebellum. If a majority of those are imbalanced, then that's going to indicate that the posture and the atlas is off. And nowadays, and even the chair that I'm in, it makes me sit in an uncomfortable position where I automatically kind of, my shoulders become more, concave. So we have to understand that that when we're looking at a person's posture, this is going to be telling you a lot about the energy flow, because when the posture is good right from the hips, then the chi can move up the spine and to the brain. The neural, the neural cerebral fluid will go from the base part of your chakra up until your crown chakra. So this is really important, that we all have good posture, but we tend to kind of, even in my car, I was noticing I have my car seat like this. It is totally perpendicular, so I am forced to actually sit upright in my car. And same thing with office chairs and chairs that we sit in, we tend to sit very relaxed, and then we start to have that concaveness. And so when you're looking at somebody's posture, note if their neck comes forward, or their shoulders rolling forward. Those are all going to be signs that their posture is off. And again, look at all the organs that relate to that are on this. This is a little bit more updated, though. I'm always updating things. And also, just so you know, I put the date on everything. So whenever you get things from me, if you printed out a copy and you see that the copy has a new date, start printing the new copy. And I always put everything in PDF files, so you have original files and you can use them however you want. My only thing is, if we sell it, then you can't copy it and use it as a tool, as a free tool to give away. However, there's a lot of things I give you that are PDF files that you can make as many copies as you want. And another one of my popular articles is on salt therapy, because I teach people how to do salt therapy on areas that have pain and problems. Okay, now going back to the graphs, the kidney is also part of the waterworks system. So you can see here I'm probably a little dehydrated. And when you're dehydrated, you're not eliminating toxins as well. And also look at the feet when you look at the kidney, because the kidneys will release toxins from the bottom of the feet. So if there's a problem with the feet, then sometimes there's a problem with the kidney. And we can see that my feet are a little hyperactive, which means maybe I'm trying to get rid of some of the toxic dump in my kidney. And again, depending on, you know, a person's diet and other factors. And the kidney is about the kid in you. So yes, Nancy, sometimes I have to play more with my inner child. We all do. And that could be another reason why my rectum's flatlining, because I hold on to old shit. No, that was another one of my jokes. Come on, I want to see the smiles when I say that, things like that. Okay, and then we have the waterworks system that are connected to our emotions. The adrenal glands are connected to our ability to fight. So when the adrenals are weak, people don't have the power to fight, versus when they're hyperactive, it means that you could be in a position of fighting. Then we have the reproductive organs, and they're illustrated twice. Now we have to think of it in perspective of upper and lower reproductive organs. So this one is the lower reproductive organ that connects more to the prostate and the vagina, where the upper reproductive organ has more to do with the process of procreation. So it has to do with the testes and the ovaries. A lot of women who have had anything like their tubes tied or hysterectomies, you'll see imbalances in those areas. The kidney we talked about, the waterworks system we talked about. Okay, the hips are about how hip you are. And just so you know, as we get older, our hips tend to be more problematic. And we have to come to the reality that as we get older, we're not as hip as a 20-year-old, okay? When I was 20, you could say to me, hey, Suze, let's go camping this week. And I go, yeah, sure. Now, you know, I'm in my 50s and it's, let's go camping. Okay, where, and is it glamping, or, you know, so I'm a little bit more, you know, not as spontaneous as I was when I was younger. So again, I'm not as hip as I used to be, and that's where the inflexibility comes in. So a good exercise is to rotate your hips and actually say, I am hip, I am flexible. That's a fun one. I do a lot of affirmations with my treatments. So people are going home and doing an affirmation with aromatherapy, with salt therapy, or whatever else that I think that they need to do. And my feet are often very high because I fly through life sometimes. My mantra now is I have all the time in the world to get everything that I need to get done on a daily basis, and what I don't get done, too bad. You know, before I used to take it personally, thinking that was a sign of imperfection. Now I realize that, hey, I just have a lot of work to do. And then we go into the average areas of things, and that just gives you a synopsis of some averages. Now, one of the things I want to now move forward, and we'll open up the line of communication shortly, but I want to show you how to do the biofeedback component. So I've got to make sure my connection is on, and I'm going to also make sure that I'm ready for my next reading. Okay, so we've got everything lit up. However, I don't think my connection is connecting. Oh, here we go. So just by hitting that button, you'll notice that everything cleared. I mentioned that earlier when we did the tutorial, that everything cleared. So just by hitting that button, it'll clear the screen. My connection's in, so I'm ready to do the next scan. So I'm taking my hand plate and I'm going to put it on my lap, and I'm just going to put my hand on the system. Now, a couple of things to always note is hand placement. And I did a whole tutorial on that, so I'm not going to go into that today. But sometimes when people are coming from the cold, make sure that they've rubbed their hands together to warm them up, because if the hands are cold, then you'll actually get lesser of a reading, because your body will use the minerals within you to create that heat. So just by rubbing the hands together, we can create a little heat. Then by putting the hand on, then we're right away going to start getting an energy connection. Now, I put a couple tools here that I wanted to demonstrate to you to show you how to use the biofeedback component. Now, I like to look at everything when I'm doing the biofeedback initially, and one of the things we should always keep in mind when we're doing a reading, don't remove the hand too quick. Far often I see people when they send me recordings that they haven't kept the hand on long enough to really authenticate the reading. I like to keep the hand on the hand plate so this graph line goes by at least 2 to 3 centimeters, okay? Or I get the client to count to 100 and I wait at least 30 seconds before I freeze the sensor data. Now you can see I'm under a little bit less stress now because we're in the middle of doing, you know, our whole meeting here. I've just taken my hand off because again, I've got a good enough reading. And this also validates a few things. So you can see that in the first reading, my cerebellum was a little weak, but we're not seeing the fluctuations as we did before because I'm not having that stress that I had right before I put my hand on the system. So when people come in and they're feeling a little stressed, get them to do some deep breathing. Just have them relax so that way when they put their hand on, you're not going to see all that stress. Then again, you can see my mouth is still flatlining. My rectum is still showing a little bit lower. My hip is much stronger because I was sitting up straight. My kidney's still fluctuating. Now it's at a little hyperactive area. And look at that, my pancreas went to the roof. So I had salad for lunch. That's interesting. Maybe. Oh, I did use a vinaigrette. It was a Thai sauce. Maybe there was a bit too much sugar in there. So anyways, like I said, you know, I'm always going to sort of note the variables. So when I'm doing the analysis now at this point, what I can do is copy the data, open up my Excel spreadsheet, which is over here, right? So I'll open up a new spreadsheet. Now, I also have given you guys a PDF file of a manual form. When I'm working with clients, I actually have them write the numbers down, where when I'm doing research, I do it through Excel. So then this way, I'm accumulating the data. Now, I don't know if you guys are going to see my Excel form here, and for some reason, I'm not seeing it either. Because I have this dual system, it might not be showing. So we're going to forget about that, but I can show you examples if you want me to. But so now we're back to the screens. When I press this button in, it's an automatic consecutive recording format. So I don't actually need to press my clock in. And what it does is it splits the screen. When I go to this format, you will see the screen split in this manner. So now when I'm doing research, and often I will do 2 baseline readings back to back, and I do that for a reason, because I want to show the authenticity of the scan when I'm doing more detailed biofeedback. So here's a case in point. I had a medical doctor that had triple bypass surgery, and he wanted to test his medication to see if his medication would be helpful. And he was suspecting that the medication wasn't as helpful as he'd like it to be. So I requested that he put his medication in a brown bag the night before, after he took his last dosage for the day, and come see me first thing in the morning, because he was supposed to take it first thing before he ate. So I said, come to my office before you eat and we'll test the product. So I got 2 baseline readings because I wanted to prove to him the accuracy of the reading. So again, now we've got a second reading, and simply by removing my hand, it splits the screen, so I don't have to worry about the clock. So then when I'm comparing the data, I can see that my cerebellum both times was pretty consistent, right? So that shows you the consistency of the system. Now I want to test a product. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the chi energy and I'm going to roll it on my hand, and I'm going to do this because this is the easiest way to illustrate. On your hand reflex zone chart, this is your spine, this is your chi, this is your vitality, going from your hips all the way up to your brain. So I'm just going to massage, and if I would have been thinking, I would have grabbed my Chromalive, and I could have also done light therapy. But I'm just going to massage, and I'm going to massage both sides of my hands. I'm just going to do a quick stimulation. Okay, and so what I'm doing is I'm activating those reflex zones, plus I combined it by using a red oil. This is the chi energy. And by doing that, I'm revving up my root chakra, which is, connected to my hips, my buttocks, my rectum, and I'm going to try to feed the life force going up my body. Now I put my hand back on the system. So now the feedback is live again. So we see that we're getting a contact there. And again, I just wait for the stability of the organ grafts. And I usually wait, like I said, for the graph lines to be 2 to 3 centimeters or approximately an inch or so. So that way I have that stability of the reading. And then I can study the data to see what the variables are. Okay, so I'm just going to wait a little bit longer. I'm trying to not look at the screen too, because you have to understand our mind is very, very powerful. So I always get clients to close their eyes and not look at the screen. So when I actually did this doctor, it was amazing because the first medication, his heart energy went down. So this heart medication was not good for him. The second one actually balanced his heart. However, and I'm going to just stop it here to show you. It balanced his heart, and it reacted to several other organs and even created more strength in his whole respiratory system. So the second medication I tested actually produced conducive results. And he said, it's interesting because he said, whenever I took the first medication, I would get sick, but the second medication I felt was helping me. So that helped him understand that the first medication probably wasn't helping him. Now, I get a lot of people, I went through this phase where I said to people, bring in your nutrition, bring in your medication, I'll test everything. Now what I do is I've broken it down as simply as, you know what? If you're telling me you're on this heart medication and I'm seeing that your heart is not strong and stable, it's not working. So I don't waste time testing a product that's not working. I want to test the products that are working, meaning, in my case, we can see that my head disconnected. Now, this could have been that maybe I moved my fingers. So again, if I do a couple different things, then we can see whether or not it returns. More importantly, I'm looking at what this chi energy blend is doing overall. So now I'm looking at my 3 scans. We can see my cerebellum dropped off. My cerebrum is pretty well consistent. My forehead brain is pretty consistent. Any movements within about a 10% deviation, I don't pay attention to. I'm looking at more variables. So let's go through here. We see a little bit in the back brain, where the first reading was a little stronger, the second reading was weaker, but the third reading went even higher. So that's telling me this is good. Now this is a chi, this is a root chakra blend, but it's not helping my ear either. So do you think this is a good blend for me? No, because I see the cerebellum dropped, I can see that the shoulder dropped, I can see that the ear even went down. What else did I just say? And my spine actually went hyperactive. So it's actually creating hyperactivity in my spine. And that could be maybe giving a jolt up my spine that is taking energy away from other areas. So this is not a product I should be using. Okay. And it could be just maybe today is not a good product. So let's try another one. We'll do a couple things. So now I'm doing, this one is called our red essence. This is actually going beyond aromatherapy. This is when we're going into the power of vibrational tools. So with this product, we roll a little bit into the palm of our left hand, because what we're doing is we're bringing in the energy. And I'm just rubbing my hands together to burn off the alcohol. And I'm going to take 3 breaths in, because the whole part of this programming is to bind the body, mind, and spirit to the red vibration. Now, another thing, I just did a quick little visualization as well. And I did that because there's instructions to use the essence. And again, because of our time constraint. And I'm just going to throw my hand back on there again. And let's see what we see. See if this essence works better than the chi energy. Now, I love the chi energy. And oh, here's a thought. I used it first thing this morning. And we're getting later on in the afternoon. So maybe I don't need the chi energy now. So again, we have to kind of play detective here. Now, normally with a client, they may not have been using the chi energy, so it would have been a good product I normally would have tested. Okay. So we're just going to wait a little bit longer to see what we see and see whether or not the red essence is a good product for me today. Okay. Now I just moved my hand. I shouldn't have done that. Okay. And that's one of the things when you're doing testing, make sure that your testing is exactly the same over and over and over again. Whatever you do the first time, you do the second time, the third time, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so now we have a strong enough reading here. I'm going to freeze the data. And when you're doing yourself, it's easier if you actually hover your icon around the clock so you're not moving your hand too much. Well, because my cerebellum flatlined the last time, you can see it's trying to reconnect, which is a good thing. Now, this essence made more energy in my my cerebrum. Here, my forehead, it's pretty consistent. The temporal brain, pretty consistent. The back brain, it actually went down a little, but let's see what happened with the other organs. Okay. Sometimes sorry, I'm going to zip to, come here, cursor. I zip to this one because it's a little bit faster for me to analyze the data. So we can see here that the hip is trying to go into a neutral. The feet went down. Oh, this is exciting. So that's good to see that my feet went down to a more neutral state, because every other reading it was in a little bit more of a hyperactive state. Now my spine has regulated itself. So again, we see a positive response to this product. I'm just going to quickly look at that. Rectum is duplicating itself, so either or. The stomach, basically the same. The armpit jumped up. Oh my goodness, look at that. So the armpit jumped up. And now it's stronger and stable compared to my first reading. So that's good news. So this is how you use the biofeedback. Now, because I have a pitta frequency, and especially when people have a weaker frequency, sometimes it's harder to see the results, but often you'll see one or two organs that will respond better than others. And that's what you're looking for when you're doing the biofeedback analysis. Now, there's so many things you can do with this programming or this software, and you can do it with the aura, but it's more dramatic having the organ graphs. So for example, some of the biofeedback that you can do with people, and I get people thinking things. So I'll keep their hand on and I'll have them thinking a thought that relates to that organ. And we can see whether or not that organ resonates at a higher frequency just with that thought or balances out. And I always remember one of my newer Biopulsar owners at the time, she phoned me up. She only had the system a few days and she goes, Suzanne, the Biopulsar paid for itself today. And I went, oh my goodness, that's awesome. Like, how? Like, you've only had it less than a week. And she said, she had a woman that was diagnosed with terminal cancer and was given a death sentence of 2 months. And she came in with her daughter, and she said it was really interesting because sure enough, in her respiratory system where the cancer was, she couldn't get a strong reading. It was all gray. But her daughter came up behind her and put her hand on her mother's back to just sort of say, it'll be okay, Mom. And all of a sudden, her whole heart chakra exploded with green energy. And her mother started crying because she understood that it was the love and the hope that gave her the strength. And she lasted for several months because, again, imagine having that power of seeing that when you hold these positive thoughts and of that love vibration of those who love you, and, you know, that can give you that motivation and that drive to last longer. You know, and this is the thing with some people, is that they don't have that motivation and drive because they don't know how to fix themselves. And I think the Biopulsar is that conduit to help people. So I will take people back in time to areas of their life that, you know, maybe there was some trauma to help heal that area. And I don't believe that they have to, you know, necessarily go through all the emotions of it, but rather just release it. And we put the intention of love and light into that organ. And I tell you, almost every single time we will see the organ that was flatlining breathe new life. And this is why we need to love and appreciate ourselves. And I tell everyone, you know, go home and give yourself a hug. I wrote a whole article on how to love yourself. And these are things that I do myself. I love to take a green color bath and hug myself and just nurture myself in that green energy. And I'm going to talk a lot about the products too, because I think we need these tools to self-heal. And also, I wanted to share something. I had a client that phoned yesterday, and I had her on the Biopulsar, and we were talking, and she goes, Suzanne, I would love to learn more about color. And I went, great, you bought my CD the last time you were here. Keep listening to the CD. And she said, well, it's a meditation CD. And I went, no, it's more than that. This CD that is created, it's 7 meditations, but each one takes you through the color power. It takes you through the chakra. But if you, as a teacher yourself, listen to this CD, and if you want to learn more about colors and chakras, this CD is 1 hour of color power, where you will learn so much about the information of the color language. And in there, I put words that resonate that color frequency. I wrote the meditation, and I hired this musician who was one of my students and is still one of my students. And I've taught her everything that I know about music therapy, because I actually did a thesis to get my color therapy degree from England on music therapy and color therapy. So I know a lot about the musical content of color. So she's overlaid so much music of the different frequencies, the mantras, the yantras, the sound, the beat behind it is exactly of that color vibration. So when you're listening to the red meditation, so I take you through a meditation of empowering all the organs connected to the chakra. I go through the emotions of that chakra color. I go through the attitude of the chakra color, and I go through the spiritual dynamics. So literally, it's you listening to me for an hour. And if you're going to learn, you got to hear this over and over and over and over again. The reason why I know the language of the aura and colors is because I have studied this for 20 going on 27 years. Okay. So color is my first language. English is now my second language, okay? So you've got to study this. The manual is loaded with information, as well as that chakra CD is loaded with information. We have an introduction booklet that's loaded with information, and I think every one of your clients should buy a booklet. So you're not spending your time teaching them this, that they can go home and study it. And I've even read that booklet over 100 times. It's my bathroom material. And I put it in the bathrooms in the office so people can sit on the toilet and read and learn about color, you know. So again, we have to educate people on what they can do to really get this ingrained in their head, because if people understood the power of color, then they can understand more about the emotional attachment to the color, the mental attachment to the color. There's so many dynamics that are attached to the color. So I guess that's what I'm trying to tell you, is we've got to get these tools into the hands of people so they can start shifting their frequency. But it's the knowledge that's power. So the more you understand and know, then the more you'll become a better reader. Okay, so I'm going to open this up now, because I think I've done a lot of talking. Now, how the heck do I do this? Oh my God, what am I doing? Oh, hold on. I'll get back. You can unmute yourself too, but I need to learn this. Okay. Thank you. Okay, ask away. Any questions?
I have a question in regards to how you tested the patient when he brought his medications to your office. You said you took it before he took his meds and then after. So
Correct.
How long did you wait after he took his meds to take another scan?
Oh, he didn't even have to take them. All he had to do was hold it in his hand. And in fact, when you buy the organ biofeedback graphs, you get measuring belts that you can put around the wrist, the ankle, and the brain if you want, depending on what you're testing. Because if you're testing anything that's for the brain, you're better off putting it right against the brain, right? Versus what I did was, actually with him, I just took the bottle and put it on his measuring hand. Okay, so when people are measuring, their hand is like this on the hand plate, and then they're putting their other hand on top to create stability. So if you take a bottle and put it in their hand like this, they can still have their hand on the measuring hand plate, and then with their other hand, they could just hold the bottle. So all he had to do was touch it. But I had him put it in a brown bag the night before so he wouldn't touch the bottle. And as soon as he came in, I had him, we put it away from him. So this way his auric DNA wasn't manipulated by the frequency. And then I introduced it when I was about to test him.
Okay.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions?
I have a question, Paula.
Okay. Now, I think you guys are going to have to unmute yourself because I don't want to spend time trying to find the unmute button. Okay. So if you can do that. So go ahead, ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Sure can. Can you hear
Okay.
me?
Yes, yes. You were talking about the acid in the stomach during sleep.
Yeah.
And you suggested to drink something at night. What was that?
Well, I work with a company called Life Plus that's out of Arkansas, and they have a pH tablet. So often I will recommend to clients that they take a pH tablet at night. And a lot of companies make pH tablets, or people could do a little shot of Himalayan salt, right? What else? Those are the things that come to mind. We used to sell a product called Trisalt, which actually was such a conduit. And again, I'm hoping we're going to bring that back at some point. And as soon as we do, I'll be screaming it to the rafters because it is such an incredible product. But any kind of cell salt, Germany has a lot of cell salts that they sell into North America.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. And did I talk about salt therapy last time?
Just
Okay.
a little bit.
Yeah, I'll send you guys my article on salt therapy, and I'm not taking notes here. So if I forget to send you something, then somebody please remind me if you remember. But I wrote an article on salt therapy, and I read this book out of Germany that got translated into English. And it's a really hard book to find, but nonetheless, I wrote the article so you don't have to read the whole book because it's friggin' boring, okay? But the book itself talked about how we need to get the remineralization into the areas of stress. And stress shows up as disease, illness, pain, and other things. So wherever people have a pain. So whenever I use my throat chakra a lot, I make a salt brine, which is in the article how to do it. And again, I'm using either Himalayan or the Andes salts because the Dead Sea salts could be tainted with plastic. And again, not a for sure thing, but my recommendation, either get the Andes or the Himalayan, make a salt brine. And what I do is I dip a natural scarf in it. And I have this beautiful raw silk scarf that's very thin, but perfect for doing this. I dip it in the salt brine. I wring it out. I wrap it around my neck. And then I put either another scarf on top, or in the winter, I'll put a turtleneck on top. So for the 8 hours that I'm sleeping, I actually have the salt therapy against my throat chakra to remineralize my throat, because as you can see, my throat, my mouth organ is gray. So I don't want to have any problems with my mouth 10, 20, 30 years from now. So I'm doing everything right now that I possibly can to keep the energy strong in this area. And as we get older, we naturally start to lose energy in certain areas. And this is one of the main areas for a lot of people because we underuse our throat chakra as well. So I teach people, if you got a problem with your heart, you dip a whole t-shirt in it. Wring out the t-shirt, put the wet t-shirt on or a semi-wet t-shirt on, and layer on other t-shirts. So again, you're sleeping in that salt brine against the area. You can do this with any part of the body that has problems. It could be feet. You can get people dipping socks in. You can also make a spray salt brine. So now that's another thing I've done. I've made my own spray salt brine, and I spray it on my throat chakra during the day. So I don't have to wrap the scarf on. But if you want to do an 8-hour therapy, that is ideal, to actually dip whatever piece of material into that salt brine and wrap it around that part of the body. Inflammation cannot grow in an alkaline state. Salt therapy is alkaline. So therefore, it'll get rid of pain, it'll get rid of inflammation, but people have to do this regularly. Gout, anything, skin conditions, especially like psoriasis or something where you see that redness on the skin, get them to dip a face cloth in it and have it there. And people can watch TV for hours if they don't want to sleep with it, right? Even men who are going bald, get them to buy you can buy those cotton hats, dip a cotton hat in it and have them wear the toque at home at night. There's so many things. And just so you know, how you can tell people are getting mineral deficient is cold hands and cold feet. Because in order for your internal organs to survive, it will steal energy from the energy pathways from the extremities that are farthest from the organs themselves, which is your fingertips, your toes, and the top of your head. This is why a lot of people will go bald, and even women, when they're low on microminerals, their hair will start to thin. So these are recommendations that even women can do, wearing, you know, a hat at night to remineralize the top of their head. But microminerals are so key. Trace elements, you know, anything along that line where you're getting your microminerals in, where your macrominerals can adhere to. Okay.
Mhm.
I have a question, Suzanne.
Okay, Jen, I'm ready for you.
Hey. All right. So I have a question on the, I guess, hormonal imbalance. So can you put the salt wrap, like basically on the foot, the reflexology point is on the big toe? So can you just wrap that big toe in a salt?
Why not? Why not? I'll even put essential oils on Band-Aids and adhere them to parts of the body. Okay. So you could even, you know, again, think outside of the box, put a couple drops of essential oil onto a Band-Aid, and then a couple granules of salt onto the Band-Aid, and then tie it all on. Because then the salt will absorb the oil, and again, it's against the skin. So another step we can go. Just made it up. Isn't that great?
So it doesn't necessarily have to be wet then. It's just as long as it's against the skin. And the
Well, no, you need to wet the salt, because you gotta, there has to be a carrier to bring the minerals into the body, whether it's an essential oil. It just has to be something wet. A lot of times you'll use carrier oils. This is why, you know, when it comes to aromatherapy, you need to have the oil cut with a carrier, because your body cannot directly absorb oils without a carrier. Now, there are exceptions to the rule, like resin oils. That's almost like a carrier in itself. But oils that will evaporate when you expose it to air, do you think that your body's absorbing them when you put them directly on your skin without a carrier? Not as good. You need to have a carrier when it comes to salt therapy, when you're doing it from the outside in. And I don't care how we work, whether it's from the inside out or the outside in, because ultimately, if you work from the inside out, you're then healing what's going on inside, which is then going to emit to your outside aura. Versus if you work from the outside with cosmic tools, then you're working energetically into the physical body. I like to work both ways, because then we'll have greater success. And this is why I work a lot with alchemy essences and gemstones, because they bypass the consciousness, and both gemstones and alchemy essences, they're at such a high vibration, they'll never die unless they implode, and, you know, or other things, but the energy lives on. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions?
I thought of something. Let's see. What is a reformer? You said something about a reformer.
Yeah, there's those reformers. They're about 2 or 3 inches wide, and you bounce on them, sort of like a trampoline, but they're small. Yeah.
Okay.
Rebounder. Another term for them is rebounder.
Okay.
Yeah. I called it a reformer, but I think it's more known as a rebounder, or a small trampoline.
So something like that, or you were saying the stomping of the feet to balance out the thigh?
Oh, I tell you, stamping of the feet revs up your root chakra like no others. And I just had a new owner that was doing their assignments and said, oh my God, Suzanne, when I saw the end result of stamping the feet, I'm going to tell everyone to do that now. You know, seriously, it's something anybody can do, and it only takes 2 minutes. You just sit there and you stamp your feet for 2 minutes, and you do it aggressively to get that heart revved up. That's revving up your root chakra. My dog just came up behind me. He heard me stamping the feet. Come on up. Say hi to everybody. Say hi to everybody. Say hi to everybody. I haven't paid attention to. Hold on. He just pulled out my earpiece. Okay. Okay, so you've met my dog Tex.
Got excited.
Yeah. Anyways. Okay, more questions? Okay, then I think we're done for today. So we're going to keep doing this every Thursday. Now, I had done a poll, and the funny thing is I now realize when I make a poll on my other computer, it doesn't transfer to this one. So I don't have my poll. And I know I could do one, but I don't want to take up time. So I guess one of the questions I wanted to ask, and you guys can text it to me, is what we're going to do next week. So I promise that we're going to go into aura reading, and I know that's going to take up a lot of time, but is there anything else I can squeeze in that will help you guys? Because I want to do a couple things every time we meet. So, because obviously, you know, to talk about the organ software, I slated a half hour, and then doing the technical aspect was another half hour. So, you know, I'd like to split it up so we're not just talking about one subject for an hour or so.
Mhm.
Oh,
It doesn't look like I'm talking, but okay.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Next week, could you maybe do a little bit with this similar type of reading with, for those of us that do not have the module with the organs?
Yeah, so next week we're going into the aura readings, and the aura reading will encompass everything as well. So we're going to talk about the health of the aura. We're going to talk about the emotion and mood of the aura. We're going to talk about the intellectual aspect of the aura. And again, I'm gonna introduce you to some tools over the course of the week that you may want to invest in. And I'm happy to send you guys the email copies if you invest in it, because I want you guys to get this information right away, because when we go into reading the aura, some of the things we're going to be talking about is combinations of colors. You need to start knowing which colors are emotional, which colors are mental, which colors are spiritual. And you probably know a lot of this, but I'm on the charts, I've kind of put it so you can start to study that information and get it ingrained. Because what made me a good aura reader is asking a lot of questions and correlating the color language. So when I see somebody's got a lot of like yellow, red, and orange above the head, I know that they're a very physical, earthly person versus somebody who's got a lot of spiritual colors above the head. That's how I'm going to start teaching you guys how to read the aura. Look at the patterns, okay?
Excellent.
Awesome. So until next week, guys, shine your bright light, be colorful, enjoy life. Some of you are celebrating a holiday on the weekend. We just had our Canada Day yesterday, and so that was a nice day. And I'll be sending you a couple emails this week. I'm going to be starting to send you guys more emails, because when you join in, I'm going to give you some things, and I'm hopefully, you know, enticing people to join in.